Lorraine Lee is an award-winning global keynote speaker. She is an instructor for Stanford Continuing Studies and LinkedIn Learning. She is the author of Unforgettable Presence, Get Seen, Gain Influence, and Catapult Your Career. Welcome to the show, Lorraine.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on. Tell us about your personal life, some more about your work, and why you do what you do.
Of course. So I spent the first decade of my career leading editorial teams at tech companies. So I was a founding editor at LinkedIn, a founding editor at a company called Prezi, and I have a journalism background, and so those were very fulfilling roles, and it was very fun to get into the world of tech through journalism. And then at the end of 2022, I got impacted by the tech layoffs. And so that was a very pivotal moment in my career where I had to figure out, do I want to go back into corporate? Do I want to go out on my own? And I decided to take the risk and go out on my own. And so now I am a corporate speaker. As you mentioned, I teach at LinkedIn Learning, at Stanford Continuing Studies. And then I have my book coming out on April 22nd, Unforgettable Presence. And it's really a accumulation of all the lessons and learnings over my decades plus career in tech as a solopreneur and really helping high potential ambitious leaders go from overlooked to unforgettable because we're in a distracted world. It's hard to stand out these days. And so I am redefining what presence means and how people can build their own unforgettable presence.
It is a noisy, crowded marketplace out there.
Yes.
So how do we stand out? Let's redefining presence. So what is presence?
I think when a lot of people, and George, I'd be curious what you think as well, when a lot of people hear presence, they think of more traditionally executive presence, how you show up in a room. Would you say that's probably what comes to mind for you? Yeah,
Yeah.
something along those lines, right? What I'm saying is presence is that, and presence really is both how and where you are seen. So executive presence is one piece of the puzzle, but presence is really a bunch of other things too. It's now how we show up virtually on camera. I was commenting about your background and our virtual presence. It matters how others perceive us through that. A presence on LinkedIn. I would have people say to me, even without having met me before, "Oh, you have such a strong LinkedIn presence." So they would be making assessments and judgments about me even before having met me. It's our presence when we are presenting, when we are leading meetings, even when we are in chat channels, right, communicating with our teams. It's how we advocate for ourselves and making sure that we're not just doing the hard work, but that we are being seen by the right people in the right places. Especially, like I said before, we're so distracted, disjointed. Some of us are hybrid, some of us are remote, some of us are in person. So it's about really being intentional about all these places where our presence is formed and created and where we leave impressions with our coworkers and with our peers and clients. And it's all those little pieces. So it's not just one thing, and it's something that everyone at any level can build and should be intentional about. So hopefully that's an encouraging thing for people who think presence and they're like, oh, I'm not an executive, or I have to like be like have so much gravitas or be like a really naturally charismatic. Presence is built up, I think, by all these things, and then it sort of builds into your overall presence.
Yeah, well, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm fond of saying how you present yourself matters.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and I'm sure that through your research for the book and just your knowledge, you dug into this or you're aware of it. But I can remember looking at pictures of people going to the airport and traveling, 50 years ago, and everybody was wearing a suit or they
Yeah,
were
they look
just
good.
just dressed the nines. And then fast forward to where we are today, it's just different.
Say when I fly, I'm probably more the overly casual.
Me too. But But do you think that just that shift in how we present ourselves, from dress to the way we wear our hair? I'm a guy
Yeah.
with a beard and long hair for for
Mhm.
for 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 goodness sakes, who works in financial services. So either I am not thinking about that at all or thinking about it quite a bit.
I think the perception of professionalism, of presence, executive presence in particular, has shifted over the years. There is this interesting data that was published in Harvard Business Review looking at executive presence in particular, and it compared it from 2012 to 2022. And there was a lot of changes and a lot of words that popped up that weren't there in 2012. And a word that appeared I believe both across communication and appearance that were not there in 2012 was authenticity. So people want to see your true self. They see leaders as people who can be authentic to themselves. There was also a lot of other traits that were not there in 2012. For example, you have an orientation to listen to learn instead of sort of being like the loud talker, right? You actually are like listening to people. You're empathetic. You care about your team, essentially. And, there's words that got pushed off the list, which is great. Things like forcefulness. I think physical attractiveness was one, which is funny from 2012. So there is a transformation happening, and I think COVID accelerated this a lot. And I think it's a change for the better. Of course, we still want to be professional. We want to dress well, but perhaps dressing well isn't necessarily putting on the full suit, but maybe a blazer and some cool sneakers, because that's your style.
Authenticity, being myself, because it is such a crowded, I struggle with that. I'm 46 years old and of just the advice of, hey, just be yourself. But in what context? Because there's me around my parents and me when I go to church and me at work and
Sure.
me with my
Yeah.
college buddies.
Yeah.
So you talk about being intentional about how I'm showing up. Just tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we all have different aspects to ourselves. So, like to your point, I'm different as a sister, as a daughter, as a wife than I am in a professional context. That doesn't mean that my professional self is not my authentic self. This is how I like to show up professionally. And it's really about being thoughtful about it, right? Like you said, like I'm not going to be so casual like I am in a very, like in a friend setting than I am with coworkers. You might bring some of that, but you still want to be professional and you want to be intentional with how you are coming across and how others perceive you. There's a boundary, right? Like it's still it's still the workplace. We can't go too casual, I think, in my own opinion. But yeah, I think we all have different versions of ourselves. So to tap into that and to create like what is that version you want for yourself? I talk a lot in the book about this concept of your career brand. Essentially, what it is your personal brand, but I call it career brand because personal brand, I think some people are like, oh, that's kind of slimy, like I'm marketing myself. Career brand is your brand in support or, yeah, helping to further along your career. And the thing about our brands, our career brands, is that we all have one. So I know some people like maybe kind of want to steer away from that word, but it's essentially our reputation. And so we want to be intentional about that. I have this framework in the book, Epic Career Brand. So, how do you build your career brand or how do you start thinking through it? Use the Epic framework. Think about your experiences, both personal and professional. We all have different personalities, right? So, I'm maybe like more serious than more playful, like at work, and more introverted, right? So that's part of my brand. Your identity. So what are your values, your background? How do you sort of like to operate? What values do you live by at work? For example, for me, like relationships are super important and following through on what I say. And then the last, community. You want to make sure that you might have a perception of yourself, but if your community is not seeing you in that way, that there's a disconnect. And so starting to think through others' perception of you as well as how you want to see yourself is a really valuable exercise. It takes some time, and this will transform over the years as you change as a person and your goals change. But I think your career brand and how you show up at work, like that's important. Like you don't want to just show up and sort of leave things to chance. You want to be intentional about it.
I hear that, and I think it's really exciting that I get to create and
Yeah,
shape the narrative of how I want to be perceived from a professional
exactly.
standpoint. So particularly, if you have the opportunity or you're in a position like you found yourself a couple of years ago, say, okay, I'm going to be changing gears here. I'm going to go out on my own. Or maybe it's somebody who's just making a shift from one really great company to another, and you say, okay, I would like to refresh, adjust the way that I'm perceived because maybe I feel
Yeah.
like I'm not getting the recognition that I feel like I'm worthy of.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what happened to me. So I opened up the book talking about my time at LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is such an amazing company to work for. I loved my time there. I worked on really high profile projects, but I really struggled to get promoted, to get seen. And I was like push, 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 but just couldn't figure out how to make it happen. And it was only until wasn't until I left LinkedIn where I did a lot of self-reflection. I'm like, what? Like, why was that so hard? Like, everyone liked me. I liked everyone. Like, I worked on those big projects. And it was like a big mindset shift. It was, again, that intentionality, like, oh, people really probably saw me as a doer. I didn't know how to advocate for myself. I didn't know how to promote my work. And then to your point, George, like I go to the next company, I'm like, I want to be perceived as a leader. I want to be perceived as strategic. I want to be intentional. So like so early on, I asked my manager, or I told her, I was like, I want to get promoted to director. Like, how do I get there? What are the skills that I need to show, to exhibit in order to get there? And so, yeah, like you said, like that's my career brand, right? Like I'm trying to shift it as I change jobs.
So you advocate to be honest about what it is that I aspire to do. You
Oh,
told one of the leaders.
100%. Yeah. I also in the book I mentioned the story when I was at LinkedIn. I had this coworker. She super well liked, did great work, had been at the company longer than me, and she hadn't gotten promoted yet. And then one day I come into the office and she's promoted, and I'm super happy, super excited for her. And I just go up to her. I'm like, "What happened? Like, I know you've been like waiting for this for a while." And she's like, "I simply had to like tell my manager that that's something I wanted." And I think we forget because we are all focused on ourselves, right? So it's like, of course, like our manager should know that I'm ambitious and I want to get promoted and I want to get the raise or whatever it is, or do work on that project. But our managers also have their own set of problems, their own set of challenges, their own career goals. So they're going to be most, as good as they are, they're going to be focused on themselves. And so that's a theme a lot in the book that I talk about. It's like asking for what you want, making it known, and don't just say it once. Say it multiple times in a, tactical way. Don't be annoying about it, but people forget things. And again, the theme, one of the things we're touching on is how distracted people are. So we want to make sure that people know and that we repeat ourselves, so that people can't miss it.
Do you think that there's a lot of people out there who sort of fit that mold of I am a really high performing individual contributor. I'm busting my butt. I am a doer, wanting to be a leader,
Yes.
but they feel like I don't want to put upon other people, and I bet my manager gets this 500 times a day from everybody else. But I wonder if that's actually true. I wonder if there are a lot of people who are being proactive.
I think there's a lot of people who are like me or how I was back then. And that's why one of the reasons I wrote the book. Like I talk to people all the time in my role now. Like I go speak at companies, I'm coaching, and this is a problem. And the thing is we're not taught in school how to do these things. And there's not really courses at work, right, that also teach you how to do these things. And so it's really like through observation, perhaps having conversations with like mentors or your managers. And so it can be a challenging thing. And these are all skills that we need to practice, right? Like even knowing how to promote my work, share my work. Like I would run emails by my manager and be like, is this okay? Like, is there anything I should take out? Like, am I framing this correctly to be most impactful to like the leadership team? So these are all skills. And I think a lot of people struggle, and the book really is especially targeting that mid-level. Mid-level to get to senior level, that's a hard jump because you get rewarded up to the mid-level on being a doer, like you said, George, like executing. And to get to this level, that's another whole new set of skills that you have to exhibit to get there.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I think that I know how hard that is for sure. That just because I know that I'm supposed to be doing something, but if I don't know how, it's not obvious that I have these skills because they're not innate. And even when I do get them, I need to practice it because I need to get better at whatever the thing is that I'm doing. So I think that that's super helpful advice.
Yeah, 100%.
How granular do you get with people? Do you talk about, the style of clothing you wear, your personal hygiene, your hair, your language? How
I like to get pretty tactical. The whole book is meant to be a guide. There's scripts, there's frameworks. It's important for me whenever I teach that there's a takeaway, some action you can do, something you learn and can implement right away. So, when you're talking about clothing, things like that, for example, I talk a lot about your virtual presence, having a strong video presence on camera. And I talk about something called the T method. So, tech, energy, aesthetics. these are the three key things you need to think about before you get on any call and the things you need to set up. Now, of course, we see podcasters and they can get super fancy with their setups, super fancy camera, like the mood lighting, all that. But I just like to keep things simple and, what is like the basic things you can do that will still make a strong impression. So, like you asked, like clothing, for example, that would appear in aesthetics, the A of T. Then tech, like I'll talk about the equipment you need, like the basic equipment that you need, energy as well. I'll talk about like how you speak, like voice intonation, things like that. So I do like to get specific because I think, especially when you're learning something new, like to be high level, it's just too up there, right? Like you need to kind of get grounded and to once you start practicing those skills and feeling confident in them, like your confidence will continue to grow and you'll be able to learn and take on new skills even faster, I think.
Yeah, well, I 1000% agree. I think that that's awesome. I think that it's so wonderful that you did the work of creating these frameworks and then creating scripts for it. Because I think that
Yeah.
that's just so helpful to me throughout the course of my career is I have to have the right words
Yeah.
and obviously what you say, I'm going to say a little bit differently, but you're
Sure.
going to
Yeah.
give sort of that foundation that anybody can take and sort of build on and craft their own message and their own career brand.
Yeah. Exactly.
So push, push, push. I think that there's probably a lot of people myself who are very familiar with that. You feel like you're pushing and you're pushing, you're pushing, you're not getting anywhere. You talk about feedback, asking for it. That's a really, I think that that's hard for a lot of people, and then actually listening and embracing it. I think that that's such an important skill that people need to learn.
Yeah, feedback is a toughie. I'm someone who's always loved asking for feedback and asked a lot up for it, but despite asking so many times, it's still a little bit uncomfortable. It's never feels good to be like, what can I do differently? So I have a framework, the three R's when asking for feedback: request, reflect, respond. The first one, request, it sounds so obvious, but so many people don't ask for it and they only wait until annual reviews to be like, okay, what's the feedback? Like what's my 360 review? To request it more frequently to your manager, to your peers, whoever it may be, shows that you are someone who wants to learn, who wants to improve, and then it it sort of negates like that nervousness that we get when asking for feedback. Like, right, the more you do it, it sort of desensitizes you a little bit to it. So requesting more is always a good thing. Then you want to reflect. When we get feedback, um, even if it's delivered in the nicest way, you feel that little like, oh, like, like, your stomach sort of turns. You're like, like it's never good to hear something that's not a positive thing or like a little bit more constructive, a little bit more critical. And so a lot of people's reaction might be to like be defensive or like, oh no, but I did that because, or just to respond with whatever first comes to mind. So reflecting and just taking a moment to really think about it, because not all feedback that you get is going to be feedback that you should act on, right? So reflect, have I heard this before? Is this feedback going to be helpful for me to reach my goals? Thinking about all those things is important. And then eventually after that, you respond, right? So then you've thought about it. Always say thank you, right? Like it's also scary for someone giving feedback, right? Like we forget that that's a scary thing too. So simply saying thank you, and then if it makes sense, like talking about how you're going to make the change, how you're going to hold yourself accountable. Maybe you come up with a plan together. So those three R's, I think, are an easy format to follow to make sure that you are asking for it and receiving it well.
Yeah, I love it. You have a framework for that even. So I also I think that that's
I love a
incredible.
framework. What can I say? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's so useful.
Yeah.
So valuable and it's such a real thing. I mean, anybody who is really, I don't want anybody to not do something because it makes them feel uncomfortable. Because anytime we're doing anything new, it's going to be uncomfortable. And
Yes.
so I think there's sometimes people think, oh gosh, it's not for me because I feel so bad about doing it. No, everybody feels that way. And to your point, the more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to become, or the less uncomfortable you're going to become. So I think that that's wonderful.
Yeah. And growth happens most when we are when we are uncomfortable and when we push past that. And that's something I've also learned over the years. Like the scary things are the things that are the things most worth doing. Most people who don't push past a scary thing, they stay where they are. But if you want to grow, if you want to learn new things, if you want to try, right? Like, yeah, you're going to really separate yourself from the pack by doing those scary, uncomfortable things.
Yeah, love it. Well, Lorraine, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people learn more about you? How can they engage? Where can they get their copy of Unforgettable Presence, get seen, gain influence, and catapult your career? And for people who are interested in having you come speak, how can they make that happen as well?
Yes. So you can find the book at unforgettablepresencebook.com. And if you pre-order before April 22nd, you get a bunch of pre-order bonuses, some workshops, a lot of one-pagers, guides that you can take away to start your learning now. And so you can submit your pre-order receipt there, but you can also find the book on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, and all your typical places that you get your books. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to see you there. And then if you want to reach out to discuss speaking, you can reach out at contact@lorraineklee.com.
Excellent. Well, if you enjoyed this as much as I did, show Lorraine your appreciation and share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas. Go to unforgettablepresencebook.com and check out all the great resources Lorraine has been talking about, or just pick up your copy on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. And find her on LinkedIn and get in contact about having her come and speak at your next event or your company or wherever you'd like to have her come speak. So thanks again, Lorraine.
Thank you.
Until next time, remember, do your part by doing your best.